Hello, everyone. My name is Luna, for those that do not know. I'm going to just be doing a quick introduction for this video series that we're going to be starting. If you do not know, I plan on posting a podcast about game design and game development to my YouTube channel, and we are going to be doing every episode live prior to doing it, so people can actively ask questions, we can have live guests, and all that fun things. For those that do not know, I have studied game design and game art and continue to work at my knowledge of it. And I need everyone to understand at the beginning of this that these videos will include a lot of my personal thoughts on these topics. I try to base my thoughts on facts, but I still have my personal opinion about games and about topics within games. Um, Now, this is also to get my thoughts and opinions out there to try and show my interest to other companies and see if they agree with my opinions. Um, and one of the things that will probably be noticeable is I am a VTuber. I do this to be more interactive because I do not tend to have a face cam on. Um, but I want to have that little bit of interaction with everyone, that it's not just someone talking at you as a voice inside your head. It is not to seem unprofessional. It is to just allow for a bit more of a connection. Throughout the time, the model will change, and it will just slowly show my different skills on how I create, texture, rig, apply, upload, and everything. Game ready models, art, 2D art, 3D art, anything. Just listening while you work around the house. That's not embarrassing. Um, Anyways, today we are going to be talking about narrative in games. We do not have any guests with us here today. Our original topic for our first episode had to be changed due to some conflicts with scheduling. So we are instead just doing some a different topic that I can do on my own. Um, so narrative in games, that tends to be where your stories and the concepts of the game, the theming of the game comes from. Now, not every game relies on narrative. Look at the game chess. You don't need a narrative to play chess. There is one. There, you can make your own too, but you don't need it. However, if narrative is the main point of a story, it should be clear to the player. If the story is not clear, the player will end up not caring about it, and it's potential that the story will get muddy and confusing to the player. Stories also tend to be what drives the player throughout the game and gets them to continue playing. It's not the only thing, but it's one of the main things. And players can also express themselves through side stories, collectibles, NPCs, and other various aspects of narrative in games. And depending on what the player ends up discovering, will vary how they view the game and how the game applies their actions. Also, I know I'm taking very long pauses, and I'm sorry about that. I am trying to remember everything I was going to say. Um, Even though I have literally a script in front of my face, I'm trying not to read off of it. And this will get easier the more we do these. And I think I want to do one like once a month, probably. That seems like a reasonable length for these podcasts. luckily, I will be editing these more properly for it to be an actual video. Um, so narrative in games is actually something that inspired my what it's called a SIP project for my college degree. It is a student innovation project, and pretty much I had to come up with an idea that we do not currently see in video games or in a certain industry that uh, follows a degree at my school. I was inspired by some of these narratives and games to want an idea that a timeline of the story was based on choices, but those choices had to be made within a certain span of time, otherwise it changed the ending of the story. And I still hope to one day see something like that in an actual game and not just the prototype I had made. But we will see as time and the world develops. Anyways, if we want to talk more specifically about a game, um, I have multiple different games I can cover. There's a lot of good story-based games out there, and a lot of them have different aspects that make them so good. And we will eventually talk about games that will also have disappointing narrative to them. Because not every narrative that is for a game is good. Um, so I am going to start off with my favorite game, Outlast. Outlast, if you do not know, is a story-based horror game, and it is taking place as a reporter that enters an asylum after getting a letter from someone within the asylum saying that something horrible is going on. Now, it does have a story. It has a huge story to it. However, you have to read most of the story, and parts of it actually aren't even in the game itself. You have to read it on their website. Um, However, it is a extremely good story, and I love it. The game didn't focus too much on the story outside of the character just goal of getting out. If you didn't read anything within that game, you missed out on a incredible story. Now, putting down these documents and notes are only just one method of how video games display narrative. Narrative can also be done through character dialogue and actually just visuals within a game. You could just, if you place, say, let's think of like an ancient scene, and you want to show it as like a war scene that happened long, long ago without actually going and saying it's a war scene. You would apply weapons that were decaying, shattered, like maybe pots or walls or something, depending on what kind of battle happened, whether it was a gunfight or whether it was hand-to-hand combat. It would vary a little bit, but you can display that through visuals. Outlast does do that in some ways too. However, most of their story is told through the documents. Um, one of the things that does interest me about Outlast and is the fact that Outlast was based on an actual project that happened in the US that was run by the CIA. Now, it is not perfectly accurate, as there is definitely twists to make it more of a video game concept and more interesting than what we know it was. Yes, Outlast was based on Project MK Ultra. Um, I don't want the movie, but you can actually find a whole lot of information on it. Oh, just told when you were today's year old when you learned that. Yeah. Um, it was mostly focused on the idea of the drugs that they use to brainwash and torture people to find information. This was taken place, if I remember correctly, during the beginning of the Cold War. So a lot of trying to find out spies and information and other different things. The second game also, in fact, is based on the fact that what they were doing was affecting a nearby town and it was causing infertility. Never connected the dots now. Yeah. It's an interesting story, like if you actually like dive into it. Um actually like some of the documents within Outlast uh are actual copied and pasted documents from the CIA, just filled in the blanks. A lot of declassified, yeah. Like these are actual documents retyped and filled in the redacted. It is super interesting. Gonna have to look into it now. Do it. There's a reason why I love the narrative in Outlast so much. Despite it not being in the actual game for the most part. It was the start of the Cold War, yeah. Okay. Had been a little bit since I looked into exactly when they took place, but that's cool, yeah. Now, not all of them are like perfectly taken because there is obviously like some about Billy, and I don't think. No, I haven't gone and actually looked at the CIA documents. I just looked like did the research on how it related. Um, if I remember correctly, Billy and like the Wall Rider aren't actual things that exist. It was more just the psychological effects that happen. Um, the infertility was a thing because uh, in Outlast 2, if you remember, there is like the flashing lights that happen like across the lake and cause the whole city to, or not city, town to like go crazy. That was something that was actually happening. Now, I don't know about the whole like religious and sacrificing part, but there's a reason I love this game and this game series. They did their research. However, just doing your research does not determine how good a game's narrative is, because you could do a ton of research and it not be a good narrative or not a required narrative. Um, trying to think. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Um, because like there are other games out there that have good narrative that I have written down and we may or may not get to. Um, like Alien Isolation. Alien Isolation isn't based on anything real. I mean, I'm sure they did some research and obviously had the movies and that kind of stuff as concepts, but they're not real, not like Outlast is, but it's still an extremely good narrative. They want to convert opportunities to be a double agent and one, yeah. Yeah, they wanted to make the truth serum and they were using like I can't even think of the drugs that they were using. A lot of the drugs that exist nowadays were created by the CIA. Or not a lot of them, but like a lot of the like mixed stuff was probably used at one point by the CIA to try and create a truth serum. And truth serum is not real, so like it is, but it isn't. Like it doesn't actually necessarily work. Um, I highly recommend looking into this if you're interested. There's a lot of information on it. And you don't even necessarily have to look up specifically Project MK Ultra. You could just look up the relation to Outlast and you'll find out a whole lot of information. Um, Red Barrels did a really good job. Different forms of psychedelics, yeah. Um, Now we could continue to talk about the CIA, but we're not here to talk about the CIA. We're here to talk about video games. um, but research documents, all of that is something that makes narrative really impactful within video games. And there's so many ways to show it too. Now, Alien Isolation did not really like it had some documents that you could read to find out the narrative. Gonna go back to this because it's the next one on my list, anyways. Um, and however, but it's not a written story. You play as the character, and the story develops as you play. You play as Ripley's daughter, from the movies, and if I remember correctly, at least, I'm pretty sure I researched this when I made my notes. So my notes were also from a while back. I could be mixing up Ripley's name. That's the only thing. But the story was to keep the player going and discover more about the xenomorphs and what is happening and what has happened. It's just another step in the development of this universe with the aliens. Now, if you don't know much about the movies, you don't need to play the game. However, the more you know about this universe, the better the game becomes. You will find a lot of Easter eggs within the game if you have seen like the movies and other various versions of this universe of how it's been displayed. There's been multiple different games as well. There's I know there's Alien Isolation, um Aliens, Firearms, hold on. Aliens, uh Dark Descent? What? Okay, some of these games I've never heard of though, but there is quite a few. Um, it's It's a very linear game, though. That's one thing I would say I personally did not like. I like having choices. Outlast is also a linear game, and I tend to play a lot of linear games, but it would be more interesting if you could make a choice and weren't just strictly following a story. However, that's not always necessarily worth it for games. Alien Isolation, I don't know what you would actually end up making a choice. How many choices could you actually make besides, like, the only thing you could make choices on is if you talk to people or not. And if you don't talk to people, you don't learn the story. You don't learn why you're there. You don't, there's a lot you miss out on. Now, Alien Isolation is one of those games that is not just told from player to NPC. Alien Isolation is a game that is also told from their environment. You can tell things that have happened within the game. You can tell where the alien has and hasn't been, where they have and haven't had affected, where they currently are based on in-game environment details, which just gives you even more information about the story behind the xenomorphs and why they're there, what they're doing, what, like, how they go about their lives. Xenomorphs try to be stealthy. They try to hunt, according to at least Alien Isolation, they try to hunt in small spaces and attack from above, below, the sides. And that just gives you more information of how the aliens actually think, what they're trying to do. You would have had to rewrite the story, a good portion of the story to allow choices exactly. That goes for pretty much any linear-based game. That's what you just have to do. Um, it's not necessarily like, how to explain. It's something you have to make a decision on when developing the game from the beginning. Like, it's not something you make halfway through the game. It is what you decide during pre-production. That is actually why narrative is one of the important factors in pre-production, even if you are not making a game with a narrative, because it does choose your theming. Recently, one of the projects I worked on, we decided we were going to make just a simple, like, tank game, and we were asked, like, why a tank game, and we had to come up with a little bit of a story just so there is a theme, there is a reason for the character to be doing this, not just, oh, they're playing a tank. Now, we're not focusing on the narrative for the game, we're just focusing on the mechanics and making it a playable game. But that's because there is also no need for a narrative within our game. However, pretty much every game has some sort of narrative reason or something. Like, there is even a narrative to Tetris. I don't remember what it is. There is a story to Tetris. I'm sure we could actually probably look it up right now. I'm gonna pull it onto a different tab though. Over it. All right, hold on. Let's see. Um, so pretty much like the narrative to Tetris is just a rising tension And this is like an interesting way to word it too. So I'm trying to like, because these aren't my own words. I haven't actually looked it up. So like, I'm not going to repeat what is said. I'm going to try and formulate it. In a way, you're creating a story between the tension of the player and AI refusing to give them the piece they need to continue playing the game. And that is the like little bit of narrative to Tetris is just the struggle of not getting what you need. But like when you play Tetris, you just think you're just dropping blocks and trying to win the game, even though there is no like real win to the game. There is only an end. Got water. Also, I should not be singing right now. This is why I should have turned off the music, but it would be too deadly silent for me to be doing this without the music. Now, let's see. There are so many games we could talk about. Because like I have Layers of Fear 2 on here. I have Soma. I did Portal, Life is Strange series. So many good games. So many like ideas to cover, and I don't really want to cover them all in like one go. Just I also feel like I'm kind of repeating myself just a little bit. So I don't really know. Narrative in story is a key component, even if the game doesn't have any core story mechanics. It is an important piece too when making the game. Now, hold on. Let's see if I can also pull up something else about this. So I can direct my thoughts a little more. All right. See if this loads. This is something I should have probably pulled up before starting, but it was kind of important. Now there is videos that we could watch that are really useful, but we're not going to watch them. That's not the content we're here for. Okay. I have found other ways of like I was trying to think of them. I couldn't think of them. So there are different ways to tell stories. One is scripted events, things you typically see. These typically have animations, typically often also pull the character out of like being in control. Sometimes they're just events that happen and the character has to make choices, things like that. Silent storytelling, environment, that's what I was talking about before. That is your environment stuff. Things you see visually that tell you what happened without actually telling you what happened. Uh, a voiceover commentary. That is also another common one that you see. Typically, when you start up the game, your character might be talking and telling you about their life. And then rendered movies, that's a part of typically scripted events. That is your animations, your things that take you out of the game. The not just you make a choice, it is these are forced, these are you have to watch, you have to maybe you load into a game and you get this long intro. Outlast is a perfect example of your character driving down this road and you hear the talk of the radio. I can't remember exactly what they say on the radio, but they talk about it. Conversations, that's the one we talked about. That's typically with your NPCs. Trying to figure out what just we haven't covered. Because like I know I've been bouncing around on topics a little bit, so I'm hoping I'm getting every idea that I want out. We will be doing another probably narrative just so I can cover the other games I have prepared. But they just won't be today, and we won't be covering all this intro part, like all the like not intro, but we won't be covering all the what is narrative, how do you see narrative. We might cover it a little bit in a future episode, but not. It would be more just as a refresher and less than what we did today. I think I've pretty much covered everything I can about general narrative though. Um and also specifically a couple games. Now, I could also do the one of the games I didn't think had a great narrative. That's another thing we can cover is what isn't a good narrative. Because we haven't done that yet. So this one's a little hard for me to describe exactly. I kind of hinted at it towards the beginning when I first gave my like talk about narrative in games. But one of the biggest things is like when the story gets muddy, when the idea of what the narrative is gets muddy, because narrative is not always story, but story is typically your narrative. But when that line starts getting hard to see and you don't really know what's going on, that's when you don't have a good narrative in the game. A game that I found to have a very disappointing story was Amnesia Rebirth. Now, it wasn't probably the worst story out there, but it ended up being very disappointing. It was confusing at times, never really knew what was happening. You were constantly switching between two worlds, and none gave a clear, like, this is the reason why this is happening. Like, the only thing you get is, like, you are sick with something, but not exactly what you're sick with. Your child is also sick. And now there's, like, some uh, weird, like, spirit lady trying to take the child from you. Um, and supposedly you have been here all before, but that's amnesia for you. You're always kind of there. A good narrative doesn't need to be explained exactly. That is exactly like when things start getting unclear, that's when your narrative starts failing. Really wonky. Yeah. I honestly was disappointed by Amnesia Rebirth. Like I had high hopes from the game for the game, but it was hard to understand. Like the other games seemed much more clear, or that at least you could provide a reason to it. Rebirth, the whole other aspect of another world, that's where the game was like really muddy. Really, really muddy. I didn't really know it was happening. It's fine. Um, we've been going for some time. Like we did Overwatch for the first hour, and now we're here. Um, we'll be doing more of these. I said earlier, I wanted to try and do these like once a month, and it'll be less kind of like thrown up, not thrown up, but thrown out there. Um, I'll set like an exact date and time when I was when I was playing these. Yeah, yeah. To be honest, I can't even really tell you what that story was. They could have done a lot better with it. This whole part, this whole part with the giant baby, that made no sense. And then the ending didn't make any sense. And I know there's multiple endings to the game, but like it still just didn't make sense. Like you could also save your baby at this like point, but I couldn't figure out how, and there was no clear like way to do it. And that's also part of like that kind of stuff. Like your environment should tell you what you need to be doing. I don't know. There's a lot here. There's a lot to it. And ultimately this game did not have good narrative. Um their choices were not choices. They just kind of existed and you didn't have a choice. What was it that Derek would say about game design? Cool ideas are dangerous. And yep, that is exactly correct. Pretty much not every idea is a good idea, is what it boils down to. Yes, Alien. Okay, we talked about Alien Isolation actually earlier, a little bit. I don't remember the story perfectly, so I covered what I could about Alien Isolation. We might revisit that if I can in the future. Um, I'd do more research on it before I cover it again, or if you would want to come on at some point, because you did study game design for a little while. Um, you're not just a consumer. um, not this time, but in the future. Because I do want to start getting like guests for this podcast. We were supposed to for the original first one, but my internet failed me the first day we tried to do this. Love to come on. Yeah, probably not today, but need to, yeah, exactly. I I had a plan for today, and I'm still just kind of like winging it. Uh, Thank you for the pat. I'm sure that is kind of like way off though. Yeah, I think you're patting the table. Good table. um, because I don't think I can't think of like I have plenty that I could cover, but I'm also getting tired of speaking. My jaw is starting to hurt from the amount of talking I did in this last like hour. Um, but I feel like this is also a decent amount of time for the first episode. We can continue to sit here and talk about it, but like I'll probably like cut it here for the video. Um, just because I need a minute. Like my jaw hurts. We will be doing these podcasts like once a month. At least that's my aim. Um, I gotta choose exactly which time of month. We could do the last like Saturday of every month. That could be a thing. Um, we'll see though. I'll figure it out and I'll make a post on my Discord and Twitter. Um, if you're not following that, there's my card. Both of them you can find access to. I'm glad to catch the first edition of DevTalks. I'm glad you could too. And I'll contact you when I decide to do narrative again, or if there's another topic that I think you'll be interested in. Um, I'll probably do like a post at the beginning of the month of what later in the month the topic will be. So we'll see. Um, but anyways, thank you for everyone that came by, listen to this first edition of this podcast. It's hopefully gonna work out. I don't know what I'll do when I run out of topics. I'll probably have to just sit down and research like every now and then. Um, but thank you everyone. Thank you everyone for all the support and all this. Uh, Also, speaking of something coming up, October 3rd, it is my stream anniversary. I've been streaming for almost 5 years. October 3rd will mark that 5 year officially. I am doing a Q&A, a tier list, and we'll be playing a lot of games that night. So I hope to see you all then. Check my Twitter for that tier list and the Q&A if you want to participate in it, that part. If not, perfectly fine. You don't have to do anything. I just appreciate y'all being here and supporting me. It's been quite a journey and an amazing one at that, and it's all because of you guys. Again, thank you everyone for coming by today. And I will see you all tomorrow, later week, whenever I can.